Are you sick of telling and hearing your same story over and over and over again? Are you ready to go from victim to victor? Then you're going to love today's guest. Tune in and find out how she goes from victim to victor. Let's get started. Good afternoon. Welcome to Evolve with actually just Leah. Today, Greg has been called away, so I'm going to try this on my own and see how this goes. But we want to introduce our guest today, Elizabeth Soscia with Presence Practice Coaching. And she is actually going to talk to us today about shifting from victim mindset to victor mindset. So I'm really excited to hear your story. We got to talk a little bit with our meet and greet. So I got to hear only like a snippet of it. So before we dive in, I want to ask you what even inspired you to come on Evolve podcast? I know I sent out the message to a lot of different local groups, but what made you be like, yes, I want to do this?
Well, I would say it was your energy. I really resonated
Yay.
with your energy. Yeah, and the message that you and Greg are really putting out to the world. I feel like in a time where so many people are disempowered, you're helping people to become more empowered, and it's so needed right now.
Well, thank you for the compliment, and I'll pass it on to Greg, who's not here. And what would you like people to know about you and your journey thus far? So we're talking about you going from victim mindset to victor. That's a huge leap for most people. So what did that process look like for you?
Well, it looked like, I would say, at least 40 to 45 years.
Oh, good. So
yeah, no, this was not an overnight thing. And it's really been an evolution in my life. I mean, I am the child of alcoholics. I had an alcoholic sibling. I've experienced emotional abuse in my life. I've experienced poverty in my life. I've been on the edge of homelessness in my life. And, there's been a lot of parts in my life that have not turned out the way that I would have hoped they would. But I think part of it was realizing that I never really had a clear vision for my life or what was possible. And I was working from a mindset of what I knew. And
from your home life, you're saying,
exactly.
Like just what you've observed and stuff growing up.
Yeah, and I'm also a creative artist. So over the years, people would come to me and they would make disempowering statements that they never had a creative bone in their body. And I never really understood how people could speak that way about them, because life is a creative process, right. Whether it's the clothes that you're choosing to put on during the day, or the home that you're choosing to live in, or even the car that you're choosing to drive.
It's all an expression of yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, they're all creative choices that we're making. Yeah. And if we really hone in on our creative power, we can use that to empower our lives in ways that we never imagined. And that's what I realized even for my own life, is that I was working from a set of beliefs or examples of a certain type of life that wasn't the most empowering. And I was only repeating what I knew. Right. And I even got to the point where after years of therapy, I realized I was telling the same story. And I was telling that same story over and over and again. And I finally realized I was getting sick of telling that story, that I wanted to be somewhere different. I wanted to even be someone different. And in order to do that, I needed to find inspiration. And it was looking for better examples. So if my life wasn't turning out the way that I wanted it to, I had to look towards other people.
So how did you go looking for those people? And did you consciously go looking for people to be a better example for you?
Yeah, I definitely did. I mean, first of it, I think the first thing was when I had a marriage that ended in divorce. And I experienced a lot of emotional abuse in that marriage. And also recognizing that I was consciously choosing to be in that marriage, that there was a point in time where I had to take ownership for the decision to stay in that relationship, and that I was only ready to leave it when I knew that I could do something different for myself. And so having made that choice for myself, if I wanted to have a relationship in my life, I needed to look to examples of people that I thought were having healthy relationships, because where I came from was a divorced family.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of good relational examples.
Yeah. And so my belief that I took on through that was that love in relationships were hard work, and that they were painful, and that they ended in loss.
And that was also not just what you observed at home, but what you were experiencing in you said your current marriage.
Yeah.
So that same theme was carrying through.
Yeah, completely. And so my belief was that I needed to work for this relationship, that I needed to struggle, that it was going to cause me pain. And I never really saw that it could be easy, that it should be a soft place in your life where you can actually find someone to fall into and be vulnerable and safe with.
Right.
And so I've consciously sought out, whether it's through movies, books, friends, family members, looking at what does a healthy relationship look like.
Yeah. And that was would you say that was your first like catalyst that kind of pushed you into this changing from victim into a victor? Was that your first thing that you...
Yeah, I would definitely say that was the start of it. I really got serious about a meditation practice. I think my whole life I've always had a spiritual connection, whether it be through, I was raised Catholic, and I always resonated with ritual and having some kind of connection to spirit. But the formalities and the sense of distance between yourself and the Holy Spirit, it felt like it was separated in the Catholic Church for me.
And you're not the first person to tell me that. My mother-in-law has a whole story of that. And you would probably know the term, but like when you go to get your first...
Communion.
Is it communion and you're supposed to get the Holy Spirit at that? And she didn't feel anything. And she came home and she was a questioner. And her mom was, they were a very strict Irish Catholic. And she said she came home so disappointed because she had just built this up, and so had catechism, like built up this what's going to happen. And she felt nothing and was so disappointed. So you're saying that same kind of thing, that there's this chasm between like what is supposed to be like the Holy Spirit here, and you're here, and it feels...
Well, it's there's a priest between you and God.
Right. Always the mediator.
Exactly. Yes. And I was always looking for a more intimate, personal experience of God or the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And so that led me to explore a lot of Eastern religions. And that's another book that was really transformational for me, was a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Living Buddha, Living Christ.
Oh, I think I might have read that a long time ago. Okay, so that was one of your first, that you picked up and like, oh my goodness, there's more out here that I could possibly connect with. Yeah,
and after my divorce, I really dedicated to an ongoing meditation practice. And that came through a 21-day challenge. It was a free thing that Deepak Chopra and Oprah Winfrey were offering online.
And how long ago would you say this was?
Oh, this was 10 years ago.
Okay. Okay. So like when I asked you like the time frame of like going from victim to victor, like you would say more of your life was spent in that victimhood.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, myself too. That's what, I would say mine, you're saying 10 years you started. I would say mine only started 5 or 7 years ago that I'm now, unpacking and unlearning and, really diving into a lot. But that was one of our first, Deepak Chopra was one of our first, wow, this is so interesting because we grew up in a Christian home, very strict Christian home. So we had the Holy Spirit, very Pentecostal. So the Holy Spirit was very important, very big. Now, we didn't have the priest as that stuck between, so I did feel very connected. I took it very seriously. But how was your family, before we move on, how was your family or any of your friends who maybe were more Catholic or spiritual about you taking interest in Eastern modals and religions or mindsets?
Well, I think most of my friends have been very supportive of it. It's actually friends' parents who were more conservative Christian.
Okay.
At one point I was doing yoga and a friend's mom was trying to explain to me that was worshiping the devil.
That was my family though. Yeah, the whole thing, we went through a whole... And at the time where we were, 10 years ago, I embraced that too. And I was like, yes, stay away from yoga, stay away from meditation, stay away from all of it, crystals, all these other things, they're demonic. So yeah, that was my family that you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, I think it comes from the fear of the unknown, right? If someone hasn't even explored that sense of spirituality in themselves, there's a fear that they're going to be strayed from what they know, which is a connection. I have no judgment around that. We all possess fear. And that's how they process their fear. So.
Yeah. And also fear is coming for my family and for my roots, like it came from the pulpit down. So like you're constantly indoctrinated that you cannot do that or you will go to hell.
Yeah.
Like that was very serious. It was just that serious. So yeah, the fear isn't just yourself coming up with it, but it's just you keep hearing it and it keeps being fed to you. So yeah, you believe that.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. But then when we started, I don't know how you had, but like when we started exploring these other, like I loved Ayurvedic medicine and just like diving into a lot more things. We were just like, wait a minute, how can we still feel the same deep connection? Like I don't feel like I'm separated from source and God and divine. Like I actually feel closer without all the fringe stuff going on.
Well, and I think the point that you're bringing out that's so important is trusting how you feel. That there's actually a goodness or a sense of hopefulness that opens up when you're on your path and you're doing what is truly resonating with you. And it also led me to believe, I use the word believe because one of the books that really resonated with me on my journey was a book called The Magic of Believing. I believe it's by Claude Bristol.
Okay.
And really, when it comes down to our human experience, everything that we're encountering is a sense of a belief in something, whether it's politics, religion, your creativity. It really distills down to our beliefs or our ideas around things.
Right.
And if we start to take a look at what those beliefs are doing or affecting in our lives, it really shows you the power of our minds.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I totally distracted you from like where you were heading because I always interrupt. We interrupt so much. But getting back to your transition, so you started exploring some of the Eastern things. You started a meditation. You did the 21 days with Deepak Chopra.
Yeah.
What did that start doing for you that you started feeling more of a victor?
Well, I think one of the major disempowering thoughts that I had coming out of my divorce was that I wouldn't be able to take care of 3 children on my own. And
were they babies?
They were young at the time. Yeah, my oldest was in 3rd grade. My youngest was in, or my middle was in 1st grade, and my youngest was in kindergarten, preschool. Yeah. So they were really small at the time. There was a lot going on, that's a whole nother podcast in itself. But, I
don't know a lot of divorces that don't have a lot happening. But yeah, with 3 kids, that's my sister as well. She did a podcast with us as well one time. And 3 kids on your own, it's a lot.
Yeah. And the financial overwhelm of how would I make that happen was really weighing on me heavily. And
you had sole custody and you were 100% responsible at this point, or you were sharing?
I did not have sole custody. We had shared custody, but he, for various reasons, wasn't in really great mental health space, and so wasn't really able to
care for them and take them. Okay.
Yeah.
So it really did fall for you, on you. Okay.
Yeah. And creating a stable life for them, because of the life that I went through as a divorced child, was paramount to me, and has always been one of my major paths as a mother, is creating stability for my children in any way possible. And if I needed them to be stable, I needed to be stable. And so that's where meditation and having a spiritual practice that was firmly grounded, it really helped me navigate some of the most difficult years of my life.
Were you part of like a yoga practice as well, or just a meditation at your own, like at home? Or?
Yeah, no. I mean, I had no money, so I couldn't really afford to take classes. So everything I did for free, like that 21-day meditation, it was a free offering that they had online. So I would seek out free offerings anywhere I could, and so the Deepak Chopra got me involved in that. And then there was in my neighborhood. There was a meditation group that met around the corner from me.
Oh, that's nice.
So on Sundays I would go and I would take myself to meditation group. And I realized that it was a lot easier to learn meditation in a group than it was on my own. It was helpful when I had a guided meditation, but for me to just sit in a room and meditate.
Did you feel like you would just be so distracted and be like, okay, what's for dinner? Where's the girls? What do we have to think about?
Yeah, the mind was going in a million, they call it monkey mind for a reason.
Yeah.
And the more that we can face that and sit with that monkey mind, the more that we realize that we are more powerful than the monkey mind. And it's a discipline process.
It is. And I think also, like, for us, it was a lot of things, but part of it is also in that meditation and in that enlightenment that you get is realizing you're not your thoughts.
Yes.
Like, I think we attach and identify so much to every thought. Like, you were talking about that creative person who just downs themselves, where, like, you're born with creativity, but you just keep saying you're not creative and you have no inspiration, you have no this. But we can absolutely grab those thoughts that are just, like birds flying around, but we grab them, hold them, and identify as them.
Right.
But when you can realize you're not your thoughts and that you actually can, you can observe your thoughts. Like in that meditation time, like something that our teachers have taught us is just don't judge yourself for what does come up. Okay, so you might think about dinner, or you might think about the girls or the kids or something that happened today at work. Just, okay, let it come and let it float by you. Like, let things flow past you and just observe them without judgment and just be that observer. That was hugely helpful for us. And I agree with what you're saying, having a group that does meditation.
Yeah.
Really, I don't know, it brings a lot more simplicity versus being home. I feel like you can get distracted a lot easier, especially if your kids are around.
Yeah, completely. And I think that was really the golden nugget of those 21-day meditations that I did. At one point, he'll often ask, Deepak Chopra asks these questions. He gives a little lecture before he leads you into meditation. And he poses the question, who am I? And you're supposed to ask that question to yourself. And it really gives you a chance to pause and really feel what's in your heart rather than what's in your mind.
Yeah. And or your past experiences. Like for you saying, like, I'm a divorcee child. I had this marriage. I had this, like, instead of always bringing like that victim mindset into it, is that who I want to be? And if not, how do I become what I want to be?
Right.
So how did you, through meditation and more, like, how did you start seeing yourself? Was it through that question that, like, who am I? That you started seeing yourself as more like, this is who I want to be over here.
Yeah, exactly. Identifying those parts of myself that I really saw as the true part of who I am, and that I no longer wanted to be identified by that past story. And so that if I wanted to, like, my answer was, I'm love. Yeah. And if I am love, what does that mean to be love? And what does that translate to my relationship with myself and my relationship with my children? And what actions do I need to take to continue to foster that in my life? And for me, loving myself is taking care of myself and taking care of my inner state, and everything else flows from there. If I'm upset, if I'm stressed, I'm not able to access that authentic part of who I am. And it doesn't give me an opportunity to be my best self.
So would you say, and it sounds like you're saying this, yes, but I just want to confirm that this is the same thing that, like, I'm hearing, that when you started this practice, you even started showing up better as a parent and as just a mom, a woman, a worker, whatever it is that you were showing up, that you felt you could come in like a lot more whole into all these arenas. And before we hear Ellie's answer, we have a quick tip commercial question for you. Are you a single parent feeling the weight of your responsibilities? Do you find it challenging to prioritize your own needs and rebuild your own self-esteem? Hi, I'm Leah, who you already know, but did you know I am a life coach, and I focus on coaching single parents just like you. Together, we'll work on finding balance in your life, reconnecting with your passions, and rebuilding a strong sense of self-worth. Because you deserve to thrive, not just survive. Let's embark on this journey together and create a life that fulfills you. Visit myslc.org today to learn how my coaching can help you reclaim your identity and confidence. Let's return now to our podcast.
Yeah, because as a single mom of 3 children, it pulls you in a million different directions, like you're stressed from money, you're stressed from, what 3 kids giving you their needs at once. And really becoming divorced was what made me realize I have to take care of myself. I have to be selfish. I can't just continue to give myself away.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nobody, it's that metaphor of the teacup that you have to fill it before you can fill
give.
Yeah.
And I love that you used the word selfish. I was just going to bring that up before you did there, because we have this idea that, like, especially with motherhood, we were just watching Leave It to Beaver, one of those old shows this morning that are always on, like, MeTV, and selfishness was like the main label for motherhood. And coming into just being selfish is a really hard switch for most people. Did you feel like that at first, or did you actually feel that there's so much benefit in me taking this space and, like, me redefining what selfishness was, that it didn't matter what people thought?
No, because I realized that was part of my trauma, is that for me it was feeling like I had to give myself away, that I always had to caretake for other people. I mean, when you have parents who are alcoholics, then you're always tending to their emotional state rather than really getting to know yourself and what your needs are. And when the parent can't be there because they're in an alcoholic state, you create this sense of fierce independence where you no longer identify with your own needs anymore.
So how did you come back to, like, knowing what those needs were instead of, I don't know if you're an empath, but, like, people who are more empathic, we pick up a lot of other people's energies, other people's needs, other people's issues, and they kind of stick to us. How did you identify that, like, that's not mine, but this is mine? I need this.
Well, I think through creating space through a practice like meditation, you can really start to
know thyself.
Feel into your own body. And for me, that was also a difficult process because I feel like I had alienated myself from my own body and my own feelings.
I think a lot of us disassociate from it. Yes.
Yeah. And
it's the way to cope, to survive in the situations you're talking about.
Completely. Yeah. So meditation gave me a space to really be with my grief, my fear, my sadness. I mean, a lot of times people have this perception that meditation is great, like
it can be difficult.
You really are
confronted with yourself.
Exactly. It's a mirror to your own soul. And unless you're ready to face that,
even when you are ready or you think you're ready, it's still hard, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like your true self. And I was that person that stuffed a lot of things. I've talked about it in a lot of different episodes and a lot of different podcasts and stuff, of just learning to stuff because of the same thing. Mine's a little bit different. I didn't have alcoholic parents, but just emotionally unavailable parents going through their own traumas, never processed their own grief.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't plan these children. They didn't plan this marriage. They weren't happy in the relationship, and it was just such a mess. But you do learn as a kid, like I learned, like, don't make my mom's life harder. And that was my own choice. Not that she told me that or even, gave any actions that made me think that way, but I saw her sad, and divorce was really hard, and she had two girls to raise the same age. I was 2 and my sister was maybe 4 or 5. So it's that, like, I got to keep these little guys alive.
Yeah.
Like, we have got to survive. So you're learning to, like, stuff that, and then when you actually have to face it is really hard. But I can say, and maybe you can concur, like, yes or no, but, like, once you get through that, it is so liberating.
Isn't it?
It's so amazing.
Yeah.
So to not do it, I can't imagine not doing it, because I know it would all be stuffed in there still. And how you feel after you do face these demons, so to speak.
Well, and that's what you start to realize, is there's a certain lightness that comes along with it, that life is no longer a struggle. I used to wake up in the morning and feel like I've definitely had suicidal thoughts before. I've definitely woke up in the morning in the past and felt like, oh God, another day, here we go.
Especially when you're doing this by yourself, I feel like. I remember my mom said one time to us when we were much older that she would have not made it if it wasn't for the fact that she had to get up to take care of children.
Yeah.
And I hear so many single parents say that. Yes.
Yeah, because it's easy to stay in this self-loathing state, but when you have a child, you realize, and not everyone does. Sadly, there's a lot of trauma because parents can't do that for their children. But for me, it was living for something else.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
A sense of service to something beyond myself.
But that's what gets you out of bed some days. So you felt like as you were transitioning into this, like a victor mindset, that you were just taking care of yourself. So taking more selfish space and
Right.
time, which like I wish we could use a new but better word, but that's the only word I know.
I know.
Like I said, we've identified motherhood as selflessness when really like we need to take care of ourselves. We say this all the time in so many different episodes, but like you have to put on the mask first before you can help someone else. But like
Easier said than
done. Like I'm even thinking like if I had my son's 21 now, but if he was a child in an airplane moment, I guarantee I'd put his on first.
Well, you know what? It really came down to a question for me. And that it's funny, these questions have always been the groundbreaking thing for me.
Curiosity is so important, I feel like. So questions that create that curiosity to dive deeper.
For me, it was the question, what do I need in this moment?
So you're saying like you had to take your life moment by moment, essentially. Like when you said your question had to be, what do I need in this moment? Every moment might be something very different.
Yeah, and that the wisdom or the answers are found only in the moment.
Right.
And that stress might be putting me in a state of wanting to give myself away. Like that, that was my normal stress or trauma response, is that I immediately go to someone else rather than taking a breath and saying, okay, what am I feeling right now? Yeah. And am I feeling fear? Am I feeling anger? Am I feeling sadness? Am I feeling grief? And being able to at least be present with my body and my emotions and what was going on before I
picking up the phone, texting everyone,
or
doing
even
something
just
else.
Responding to my children, because you know, in those moments you're becoming impatient, you're becoming angry with a child who doesn't deserve it. You know, and
it's funny, like I feel like this is you're our third guest in a row that is absolutely talking about this. There's like a theme here of like parenting ourselves so we can better parent our kids and how important that is. And no one teaches you this. Like you had to learn it yourself. I had to learn it myself. Other, guests that we've had in the past have had to learn it themselves. And you have to make the choice to say, I want better. I don't want to repeat, what I've done before. I really want better for my kids to have better.
Well, I think that's the natural default with when you become a parent. Humans are creatures of habit. This reflects in so many different areas of our lives, and you're never usually given a set or a manual on how to do things in life.
Anything but other than build furniture, and that doesn't make sense.
And as humans, we learn by example. I mean, that's how children grow up. They look at the adults in front of them, and so they're learning a set of behaviors or patterns. So even as parents, we aren't given a manual, so we have to rely on how we were parented, and that's not always the healthiest example.
Well, and sometimes we might overswing the pendulum.
Yes.
So like for my parents' example, my father has shared that he felt he was physically abused, and I say felt, that's his story. I don't know if that's the truth, not the truth, but his story is he was abused. So he never, I never was spanked, never corrected, he never raised his voice, you will either become the parent or try to be the exact opposite, I've noticed. In those situations where you're like, I want to be better. But not everybody can, because by default, like you said, you just pick up this habit that you maybe observed in your home.
Well, and I love the pendulum analogy that you bring up, because we are always trying to compensate for whatever we experienced, and so we swing sometimes the pendulum the wrong way. And I can definitely say I'm guilty of that, and how I originally raised my children. But it also taught me a lot of ability to forgive the parenting that I came from. And I think that was also a key part of my own healing journey, is to be able to forgive my parents and look at them as human beings, and that we are all only doing the best we can with the resources that we have.
And do you have a relationship with either party, like mom or dad, at this point?
Sadly, they both passed away in the last 3 years.
Oh, okay.
But there was healing in those relationships before they passed away.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was actually beautiful to come to that.
Yeah. Not everybody gets that, so I'm glad that you had that opportunity.
Yeah, those were some key moments of just recognizing that I wanted to do differently than what I knew, and what did the examples of going forward look like, and how did I need to consciously create that.
Yeah, and I like that you say consciously, because we've been living unconsciously when we just go by default in old patterns of just, when you mentioned how you might react or respond to something, it was knowing that, okay, I'm highly stressed right now, so I'm going to just default to that old pattern. So you have to consciously say, I don't want to be this anymore. I want to be different.
Well, and I think on some level I thought I was consciously parenting, and that's why I was choosing to do something different, but not recognizing that there was a whole slew of traumas that I wasn't actually processing through, and that I wasn't recognizing were having the impact that they had, even in my own decision making.
So how did you unpack those, or how did you actually start to realize there was stuff there that was blocking?
Well, there was
growth?
Definitely years of therapy through counseling. But again, that's where it led me to shifting from this victim to a victor mindset of every time I would go to a new therapist, I had to tell the same story over and over and reenact this history.
Right.
And it got so tiring telling that same story over and over again, because I was re-experiencing the pain of the place that I was in the past.
Yeah.
And I think, knew that there was more joy that was accessible to me. And I was ready to start experiencing that.
And I like that you said, one of your book recs, which I'll have all of these in the description, but was Joe Dispenza's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and how we have to be able to see what we don't like versus what we do. And I'm saying it wrong, but like, in order to change, we need to, what do I want to change? Okay, I don't want to be this. I want to be this. And I one of the beginning chapters, he talks about how your brain lives in the moment. So when you have to keep repeating your history that was difficult, and maybe it's bringing up those emotions, it's because your body and your brain don't know that it isn't happening right now.
Right.
And it's so horribly, like, to relive that every time if you don't want to keep reliving it. So having to, like you said, if I get a new therapist, I have to keep bringing this up. My body and my brain just responds as if it's happening again. The emotion can come up exactly as fresh as if it just happened.
Yeah, and I was starting to encounter more personal growth through coaching. I was starting to attend free things by Tony Robbins.
Yes,
and
I love him.
just the whole aspect of changing your body's energy and changing your state really made me realize that we do have the ability to shift our state, and a lot of it, words matter. So what were the statements I was making about my life? And I was often making these negative statements of I can't, or I won't, or
I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that my coach actually had said, when we say I don't know, we're actually like giving our brain permission to not figure it out.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, that's huge. And like, I know that, the I can'ts and I don'ts, and definitely very limiting. But just the power of our words and making those shifts. But you have to first know that that's, like, you have to know what to change into. Like, I've heard it said, like, you can say, I don't want to have this anymore. But that's still not saying what you do want.
Yes.
So, like, be very clear. Where do you want to go?
Well, and that's where I started connecting the dots between my life, which was as a creative designer, into my personal growth. Because here I was custom designing.
Did you say jewelry, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had a career as a custom jeweler, and I've often worked for other artists. And through the course of my own journey, I've started and run my own business for many years. So clients will come to me and say, I want to create this project, but it really requires me to sit down with them and get to know them to create a piece that really
resonates for them and captures them.
Yeah, exactly. And the process that I would go through would be to start with a thought about what I was hearing from them, and taking that thought and putting it to paper and starting to sketch out an idea, and then going back to my client and saying, these are my ideas around this, what resonates with you? So it was really done in almost a communal sense of designing with my client, but pulling out these aspects of their personality into a physical form. And so from the drawing becomes a map of how I begin to create the actual physical piece from raw materials. And working with metal and gems and all kinds of beautiful materials, it created this sense of understanding how to become an alchemist. You're taking an idea.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, from a very illusory,
a raw. It's abstract and making it concrete.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so pulling something out of thin air, essentially.
Yeah.
And that in itself, being an artist in that regard and having a practice where you're, whether it's writing a book or creating a physical object or knitting or anything, just be able to know that you can do something.
You can go from concept to creation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And starting to apply that to my life.
Yeah.
And recognizing I don't have a map. I don't have a sketch.
Yeah.
I don't even have an example of what it means to live.
To live.
Yeah, a happy, joyful life.
Yeah.
And that's, when I started looking for those examples and recognizing there are people out there who have transformed their lives. There are people who have gone through the same struggles as me. It's no longer, poor me, look at how bad my life is. But it was, hey, look at the people who are making transformation and look at what is possible. And when I started looking at life from that lens, that's when telling that old story of lack or, feeling like I was a victim no longer applied
Start
anymore.
sloughing off.
Yeah.
So through your jewelry, just seeing this, metaphor kind of unfold for you in this way of like, oh, I can do this in my own life. Did you start literally like creating yourself a roadmap as far as like, this is where I want to go, this is how I want to feel, like how you said for your jewelry, you would draw out this blueprint, so to speak, and then show it to them and just go back and forth and get that? Do you do that with yourself? And like, do you document it somehow, whether it's writing, drawing, like to point yourself in those ways you want to go?
A combination of both. I mean, I've done vision boards in the past, but I've also started with feeling and really identifying how do I want to feel in my life, and what would it take for me to feel that. And for me, it was a sense of feeling empowered, feeling like I had the ability to take on whatever I knew I could take on. And
being able to say no when you cannot.
Yes.
Was that hard for you prior to this transition?
Oh,
Were
yeah.
you a
No's are always hard for me.
Yeah.
They still are hard for me.
Still hard.
Yeah.
I'm getting better.
That's
I will
a whole
say
other
that.
podcast on boundaries.
That is my, the last year and a half has been boundary focused for me. And it still is hard. I can still overstep things and then I'll look back, but I'm much less judgmental on myself when I do mess up.
Yeah.
Because I can recognize it, like, oh, I know why I did that. Darn it. I'll do better next time.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a break here real quick, but I want to ask you before we close this episode, what is a key takeaway you'd like to leave with the listeners right now?
I would say believe that the life that you've dreamed of is possible. Yeah. Life can be transformed, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to settle for what you've known. You can look to a brighter future.
And I love that. And we will be back because I want to talk in the next episode about something you mentioned, that you went from therapy to coaching. And we're also going to segue into what you do now.
Okay.
So we'll be back in part 2 with Elizabeth. So tune into that. And until then, be evolving, people.